Hi, so in this video, we are going to talk about option 4, which is the memory forensics. We use volatility 3 to extract information from the memory image. So the first thing we do, we present these outputs back to the user, exactly like the format which was provided by volatility. And the second thing we do is we use these information to assist the forensics examiners in their work using machine learning model. How are we going to do this? Once we extract those information, we pre-process them, organize them accordingly, and create some clustering mechanisms around it. And we pipe it into some machine learning models. And the machine learning models will try to identify the suspicious path or for example, the commands were associated with the attack or anything that might be relevant to help or assist the examiner in their work. So let's get started. So if I press 4, the first thing I'm going to do is to provide the path of my memory image that I would like to investigate. In this case, this is the path. So memory information. Some examiners would like to learn about some information about the memory. But further, we use this information as part of the investigation. So if you want to learn about it, we say yes. Otherwise, you can say no. Once you do that, if we scroll back up, we get some information about the memory, which you might be interested in. And the second option is process scan. So we use volatility again to extract those information, and we sort of create some kind of clustering mechanism according to their mother processes. So what we have done here, as you can see, each of these processes that we have, we cluster them accordingly or group them accordingly. So here, for example, we say process 544 is responsible for executing process 632, 608. And the execution time was that, but we don't know the exact time. So the exit time, rather. So what we have done really here is to use volatility to extract those information, and we group them together according to their mother process. And that will actually help the examiner to learn more about each of those processes, mother processes, as well as the processes that they execute in an organized manner. So if we take a note here, we can see that this process looks really weird. This is its process ID, and this is the mother process of this process. If we go back up, we can see that this is the process ID, which is the explorer responsible of executing that. So let's make a note of this. Let's see where we can further investigate this process. Now, if we scroll down, we can see that we have provided an option to the user whether they want to get the above information in a notepad or not. So I recommend you to get that. But for the purpose of this presentation, we're not going to use this. So we say no. And then Columbo will try, again, uses volatility to extract more information, like DLL information of all the processes, as well as the handles. And again, we use these information in order to assist the examiners and use it in the machine learning model to see where the problems are. Now, we use this in the process traceability afterwards. So process tree, again, we say yes. Again, once we get these information, we sort of show this information back to the user exactly like the format which was provided by volatility. But remember, these information will be used later for the machine learning models. And then anomaly detection and process traceability. We press yes. we do some examinations again. And as you can see, we get some results back from the anomaly detection, of volatility. And then we further investigate, and this is where once the Columbo gathered all of those information, it starts its own investigation. And in here, we can see that the first thing Columbo did is to straight away identify where the malware is. And in this case, it straight away gives the complete path of where the malware is. Now, we get into this stage by extracting all of these information from the memory, and we use volatility 3 to extract those information. Once we have the information, we have pre-processed them completely and organized all of those information and pipe it to the machine learning model, and machine learning model straight away identify this path to be suspicious. Now remember, we said we have sort of identified this process during our earlier investigation when Columbo clustered these services or these processes, which was this one. And we said this process was run by a mother process called 7024, which is this one there, Explorer. So let's further investigate this. And this is where we go down back to the section which says select process ID for process traceability or learn more about these processes. So we just put the process ID there. And as you can see, we get quite a lot of information. Let's scroll back up. The first thing we observe is this process is associated with this path or with this process ID. So Explorer has this process ID. So that's the first thing that Columbo extracts. The second thing, it will identify the relationship of this process to the executable file, which is this one. It says machine learning model classifies this to be suspicious, giving this score value. So in this case, Columbo doesn't say that this is suspicious. This is suspicious because it's executing that process there. And that process was this one, which was already found by Columbo. So it's suspicious because it's executing that, not because Explorer is suspicious. Now, please remember, when you do any investigations using Columbo, take the percentage score under the consideration. And this is to minimize the false positive as much as possible. So we provide the score value to give you sort of a slight assurance, really, to tell you, okay, we think based on the previous experience that we have, based on the way that Columbo or the model was trained, that to be suspicious. So, so now we know this is suspicious because it's executing that process. Now, what we are saying here then, that this process traceability, which is the process ID here, executed at this time, and it has this process ID, which is the root process of Explorer. Now then, what we further see that this Explorer, which the machine learning model thinks is suspicious, is responsible of executing this process, and all the way down to this process. And this is the one that already Columbo found to be suspicious by 100% score, and the output is 1. Now, further, Columbo groups all the DLL files in relation to this process. So you can, further investigate each of these DLLs that are associated with this. And not just that, all the handles in relation to this. in relation to that DLL, which again, these information were extracted using the volatility tree. Now, if we want to further investigate this process, now we know straight away after a couple of clicks, we have identified the path. Well, Columbo identified the path, and it identified the process which was responsible of executing that malware and the process ID of that malware. Let's do further investigation of this. So let's take 476. And let's go down. More processes to trace, yes. And here I'm going to put the process ID. And what I get straight away, first, Columbo couldn't find, based on the information that we gathered, it was gathered rather, Columbo couldn't find any command to be associated with. But it did provide an actual path of the whole executable path of that malware there. So it says this process with this process ID, it was executed at that time, and it was executed by the explorer at that time, which has the process ID of this. So this is the dead end process. But also it says that that process, which we think is the malware, had executed this process ID, which is the CMD. Now, if I want to learn more about this, yes, I want to learn more. We can see that the whole path of how the whole processes were executed. But it doesn't find any, or there are no evidence of any DLLs or handles in relation to this process ID. Thank you very much.